common question that trumpet players seem to ask professional trumpet players or people that they admire is, what is your trumpet warm-up? And in this video then, I'm gonna share what my trumpet warm-up is. But before we do that, I really want to emphasize that asking people what their warm-up is really just asking the wrong question. And so before I share my warm-up, I'm going to share with you 4 questions that I think you should ask people instead of just asking them what their warm-up is. First question that I think you should ask instead of what is my warm-up is, what is the purpose of a warm-up? I'm sure there's a lot of different answers to this question, but for me, the purpose of a warm-up is very similar to stretching, doing mobility work, doing some of those lighter sets before you do the heavier working sets during your workout. The purpose of that work in the gym is to make sure your body is ready to do the work and that you're not going to injure yourself and you can use full range of motion, stuff like that. So a trumpet warm-up is exactly the same thing in my mind. You're doing some stretching, touching the upper register, touching the lower register, making sure your response is working, all of the building blocks that you need to be working so that when you get into your more difficult repertoire like solos or excerpts or things like that, that you are ready to do so, that you won't injure yourself, and that you'll have the most amount of consistency possible in your practice. The next question that I think would be valuable to ask is, how do I know when my warm-up is done? I think this is a good question to ask because it starts to get into deciding what is a warm-up and what is practicing. For me, I do my warm-up, which I'll share later, and then I immediately go into my gold method routine. So it's very clear to me when my warm-up is done, it's basically when am I ready to then start practicing my gold method fundamental routine or whatever else I'm working on. So if you don't have a routine like mine, it's important to be able to answer what is my main work for the practice session so that you can say my warm-up is finished when I'm ready to do my main work for the day. The third question that I think would be good to ask yourself is, what should I do during my warm-up? Now, instead of just asking me what I do during my warm-up and copying that exactly, it's important to understand that people's warm-ups are a reflection of what they need to feel ready to go, and what one person needs may not necessarily be what somebody else needs. I really like the way Barbara Butler talked about this when I studied with her at Northwestern. She would have a series of things you need to go through, and she would do it sort of in an order. So it would be sound production, and then response, and then flexibility, and so on. She's building the various skills needed to be able to play the trumpet at a high level. And she's not necessarily doing exactly the same things every day. I think she was pulling from a pool of exercises she could use. But the point is that she needed to do something to get her sound going, something that was going to help her response be as quick and as immediate as it needs to be, things like that. For you to know what you would need to do, you could start with that kind of formula or make a formula of your own, but just think logically, which skills do I need to touch in a manner where you're just stretching. We're not thinking about developing them, we're thinking about stretching and making sure that we have access to the skills that we need so that we're doing the right things for us in our warm-up. The last question to ask yourself is, how long should my warm-up be? Now, this is pretty related to the second question, which was, how do I know when my warm-up is done? But this angle of it, I guess, is just mostly focusing on understanding that you might need more time after a long, hard gig the night before, or maybe things just for you aren't coming together quickly, or maybe you're like me and you have good elasticity from day to day, and so your warm-up doesn't take much time. I tend to think about this question in terms of what Charlie Geyer told me at Northwestern, which is your warm-up should take no longer than the amount of time it takes for you to be ready to do what you need to do. So now that we understand what better questions are to ask related to trumpet warm-ups, I will tell you what my warm-up is. I mouthpiece buzz on F sirens for a little bit, maybe 2 minutes, and then I do my Chickowitz flow studies. First to the third space C, then up to G, then up to high C, and that's it. That is my entire warm-up. That warm-up takes me about 15 minutes. If I'm pretty focused, sometimes a little bit longer if I'm distracted by something else. But as soon as I'm done with that work, I feel that I've stretched to whatever ranges I'm gonna need. I've played with different dynamics. My response is working. All that stuff is good to go. I will transition into doing my gold method routine, and I'll start with long tones. Now you might be thinking that long tones are something that can be involved in a warm-up. You may have long tones in your warm-up. And of course, anything can be in a warm-up. It doesn't really matter what you do. That's why I think it doesn't matter what I do, and those other questions are better questions to ask. For me, long tones go in my routine, and I make this distinction because when I get to my long tones and everything after that, the stuff that's in my routine has a specific goal. My warm-up is to stretch and to get everything working. My routine is very goal-based, and for me, that's how I decide when my warm-up ends and my routine or my regular practice starts. I know that trumpet warm-ups are gonna be a topic until the end of time. I hope you found this video helpful though in trying to suss out whether you can answer some of these questions on your own, or maybe you have now better questions to ask other people so you can get information that will actually help you find and develop a warm-up that is customized for you and it works. If you enjoyed this video or got any value from it, I would appreciate it if you would like it and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out, and we will see you in the next video.